Here we go. All right, Miss Amanza Walton-Desir, Member of Parliament. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's such a pleasure to have you. And again, my sincerest apologies. We are, even though you can't really tell, we're in the middle of a blackout, so
Yes,
I
yes. But
apologize for the conditions.
no, absolutely not. It's my pleasure to be here with you. You know, I'm a fan of the Gyaff, and so when you reached out, I was like, okay, this is good. It's very good. So I was looking forward to being on here. And again, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And, I have been meaning to reach out to you for the longest time. We always want different perspectives from all members of our society. I do think you have a lot to offer. And, I'm excited to talk to you. But I guess, first of all, one question I want to start with is, how are you making out with this heat
I
lately?
am not.
You're
I
not?
really, it's difficult. It is very difficult, and particularly because we can't rely on the power supply, it makes it even more difficult. But I'm adapting. I am a tropical girl, but the heat
Yeah.
affects us. There is definitely something happening, and I know there are people who doubt the science of climate change, which I'm sure we'll talk about as the conversation proceeds. But it's definitely far more hot now than it was when I was a little girl growing up in the countryside, for example. So there's something happening. The temperatures are increasing, and I think we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention.
Yeah, certainly. I think also, like, coupled with the blackouts, it doesn't really bode well for the temperature
does
at all.
not. It listen, it is a struggle to be productive.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you don't have, for example, a generator or an inverter, that's it. Your day is shut when the power goes. You can't produce. You can't function in your offices, and it's the quality of life of Guyanese is severely affected by this issue, and we have to solve it in the shortest time possible.
Yeah. What do you think is, like, the main reason for, and I don't want to just sort of narrow in on recently. I know it's been particularly bad recently, but we've sort of seen this happen throughout the history of Guyana with our unreliable power. What do we need to do to sort of at least get in the right direction with reliable power? Our manufacturing industry, our potential manufacturing industry would suffer. Any new businesses, everything relies on reliable electricity, especially when we move into the modern world.
Absolutely.
What do we need to do to get a foot in the right direction?
Leadership.
Okay.
Everything rises and falls on leadership. And you're right, the power issue has been something since we were all growing up here in Guyana. And it is time that we solve it. And it is solvable. What it requires is leadership that understands that it's not about cutting corners, and it's not about what is in it for me and for people that I may support or may not support. It has to be leadership that understands that we have to solve this problem. We have to solve it in the best way possible. And we have to have an overarching vision for the sector. And, whilst I am a politician, I will say this as a Guyanese citizen: we have to demand that of our leaders. We have to demand that as our leaders. Look, Guyana, our population, 90% of our population is on a swath of land on the coastal strip. But our transmission and distribution system is shot. Absolutely needs to be replaced. Our generation capacity, we depend largely on fossil fuels, for example, for our generation of electricity. We have to have a vision that lays clearly out how that will be fixed, because these problems are solvable. What we do not have is the political will to make very hard decisions and to make sound business decisions. We have to stop making decisions that profit friends. That's the bluntest way for me to put it. It's always what is in it for me here or me there. It has to be what is in it for the people of Guyana first. This problem is solvable. We need to sit down. We need to come up with a robust energy mix. We have to have a clear path to renewables so that we wean our reliance off of fossil fuels. And we have to have the hard conversation.
Do you think renewables, the path to renewables, would be something that Guyana is capable of achieving in the short term, where, because I assume going to something like renewables would be not only a trial and error, but, we may not have the capacity for that kind of, whether it's the technology or the infrastructure for it. Do you see that as a something that should be in place of, for example, the gas to shore, or, in conjunction with it?
It should, in the medium term, be something that is in conjunction with. And, Guyana is in such a beautiful place in terms of our development. We have the advantage of learning from other nations. So there doesn't need to be trial and error in the context of us pioneering something. We're not pioneering this. Angola, for example, just launched one of the largest solar energy farms in Africa. So there are examples the world over. India, the world over, there are examples of how this could be done. The reality is, however, that it takes vision and it takes planning. And that is what we have an absence of. And my desire is for us to, as particularly political leaders, understand that there has to be a minimum non-negotiable, if you understand what I'm saying. What I mean is this: there has to be some projects that we agree to at a bare minimum. Doesn't matter who's in government. Yeah. Whether it's our sea defense and the level of investment we'll put into our sea defenses, whether it is energy security, there is a way that we can, as political parties in the National Assembly, for example, get together and agree to some bare minimum national projects that will set this country on the correct developmental trajectory. The cycle of 5-year politics, and particularly developmental politics, has to stop. It does not serve us well. It has not served us well. And we have to have the courage to change it now. There are countries, for example, I can't remember the name of the South American country, but the government and the opposition agreed that, look, we need a port because of the location of the country. I believe it was either Paraguay or Uruguay. I can't remember which one right now. But because of their geographical location, a port meant that they had an advantage in terms of logistics. Both sides got together and said, yes, we need this. This is how it will happen. And we are committing that if you are in government or I am out of government, this project will proceed because it is something that we agree to. That's the type of politics that we need in Guyana. The pettiness has to stop. The lack of vision and foresight and thought has to stop. Not being able to see beyond profit has to stop. And, I know that we can do it if we have leaders who are willing to put Guyana first.
What you're saying sounds fantastic. I mean, ideally, we do want good leadership. We do want everyone to come to the table. Mm-hmm. My question is, though, as a young person, youngish, who has sort of grown up in a divided, political environment. I hear elders talk constantly, bickering about the political situation, about how politics has stymied everything. And this is before we found oil and gas. My question is where does the buck, or where and when does the buck stop, and with who? Because, we sort of keep having this conversation. I mean, I don't mean to be negative about it, but how do we get everyone to come to the table? Because, you know, we obviously, we want the best for the country, but to me, it just seems, and this is not a criticism of anyone in particular, but it seems that, you know, it's always the person who, you know, may not be in the driving seat,
Absolutely.
asking for, you know, this sort of, let's come to the table, let's come to the table. And that switches all the time.
Yes.
So then what does it take for us to actually do it? And then how do we sort of put the jadedness of the past behind us and then move forward?
There are two things. The power of the vote. And you talk of the jadedness of the past, and I understand what you mean, because I grew up in the countryside. I was born in the quarantine, and the village that I grew up in is mixed, right? People of all ethnicities, and particularly Indo and Afro-Guyanese lived there. My best friend in primary school still lives on the quarantine, was an Indian boy. We walked to school every day from Prep A to Standard 4. Once we were going to school, we walked together every day. And it was interesting to see, as little children, how we had to navigate the dynamics of election season. I remember that very clearly, because it was as if something came over people. And there was tension, palpable tension between you and your friend. And you are at a point where, and it's not tension that is adopted, as it were, but it is a discomfort that was obvious. And as soon as elections went, it was gone.
You guys felt that as kids as well?
We felt it as children.
Wow.
And I think for me, and I've spoken to so many other Guyanese my age, and they tell you the same thing. If you ask people, they will tell you that this is their experience. The truth is that we don't talk about it enough. But I will tell you what, it was that experience that sort of, now that I look back, helped to shape this desire in me to change the political culture. Do you understand what I mean? Experiencing how happy we were outside of politics, and how just human we were. You didn't see race, you saw this was your friend growing up. It birthed, I think, a desire to see that my children can't live like this. You know, no Guyanese child should live like this. My friend should be my friend, irrespective of whether elections are coming or not. And what I long to see is the politics where we have different political views and we can agree to disagree, but that in no way affects the way I perceive you as Alex, a human being.
Yeah.
There is a level of vitriol and bitterness and hatred almost that has permeated our Guyanese politics, and it has to stop. It has to stop, because it does not benefit Guyanese. It benefits those who want to use a for want of a better word, dog whistle. Because you see, what I understand is that there's a system at work here. There's an approach to things. The country is mismanaged, but you prey on fear and insecurity to retain power. And we have to stop that. We have to want a Guyana where we vote on policy. And I'm voting for you, not because your hair texture is different than mine, or similar to mine rather. But you, in my understanding, have the best policies to move the country forward. Because you see, for as long as we subscribe to an ethnic, racist ethos in our politics, we are hampering our own development. Because it does two things. It enables unscrupulous politicians to manipulate, and it also makes us vulnerable to international interests that can come in and exploit those differences.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say, oh, you're dreaming. But I am a dreamer. I absolutely am. And I truly believe that we have people in my generation and the generations after us that are hungry for change and that can implement that change. And I refuse to give up the optimism that we can be the difference, that we could be the generation that will say, you know what? Yes, my grandfather voted for you. Yes, I grew up in this politics, but you're wrong on this point, and I don't agree with you here. Or that person is right, and that approach is right. And to me, that is the only way we are going to see Guyana develop. If we do not do that, I fear that we will be caught in this cycle of ethnocentric politics, and we will see the wealth of this nation being extracted out of this nation, building other nations, and Guyanese being left to suffer.
Yeah, agreed. But there's a lot at play here with the dynamics of voting and our ethnic divide and how the population has sort of operated over so many years.
Mm-hmm.
To that point, do you think either of the two major political parties, maybe you can't speak for the current governing party,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you can, but do you think that either of the two major parties are willing to put aside any form of sort of ethnic marketing, so to speak, as they vie for votes, and risk losing a big part of their base, just to be different? I mean, like, that's something that takes a lot to break out of, I would imagine.
Well, you know what is fortuitous about the moment that we find ourselves in is that the economic disadvantage and the disparity has now mutated, as it were, from a race issue to a class issue. And so really, Guyana needs leadership that understands that we have to take care of the poor and working class. That we have, and that spans the ethnic divide. And it will get worse as we produce more oil, as more money comes into the country. That gap between the rich and the poor will increase. So we have actually been given an opportunity, because it's not even any longer a black question or an Indian question. I travel the length and breadth of Guyana, and people, irrespective of ethnicity, are saying to us, we are suffering. We are having a difficulty giving ourselves 3 square meals a day. We are having a difficulty, for example, affording medicine. The healthcare system is slow. So we have the opportunity here in that, as maybe divine order would have it, that the issue of want and poverty has now spread across ethnicities. And so it has the power to unite us in a quest for a better life for every single Guyanese.
Interesting. You touched on something there that really speaks to me. You talk about, we have a big class issue in the country.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, I don't think it's a class issue for me in terms of like, oh, they're just poor people and rich people. I think this is just my subjective opinion. I really think for an oil-producing nation and a fastest-growing economy, we should have a bigger middle class.
Absolutely.
You know, we definitely should have, like, there should be more common ground between our population. And we have seen the gap grow. And, you know, even me as a young professional, I don't consider myself, you know, a poor person, neither a rich person, but I do feel as a young professional, as someone who owns their own business, I am finding it increasingly harder to believe that we're this great country with all these great things when, you know, the cost of living is going up. I'm finding myself a bit behind the eight ball. Obviously, there's people who are worse off than me, but I do feel the squeeze. And, you know, I think I could only imagine what the majority of the population is feeling and how, and the sort of, you know, resentment it is, because, you know, and you do hear every day about how many barrels of oil are pumping and where we're going and the opportunities and this and that. But, you know, how do we exactly, what are we doing wrong right now? What are we doing wrong that is not allowing us to have more economic or financial equity, you know, across classes? And to that point, I just want to mention that, you know, I know you have you've had criticisms of the direction the current government is going in terms of I know the party has said it's a sand and stone government. You know, they're focusing on a lot of roads and infrastructure, which, you know, for many is a good thing. But, like, you know, how do we sort of, because I believe that's a good thing and that will push our economy. But how do we sort of reconcile the two? What else do we need to do other than these big infrastructural projects?
There has to be balance. There has to be balance. And there has to be a strong emphasis on the development of your human capital. And that is what is missing from this current government. The middle class has all but disappeared over the last maybe 4 to 5 years. And it's directly because of the fiscal policies of the current government. I want to be clear that the problem is not with infrastructure. The problem is that this government does not have a balanced approach to the growth and development of this country. You cannot build roads and bridges alone and not see the need to invest simultaneously, or even more in a greater manner, in your human capital. And so you have physical infrastructure here, but your human capital is here. And this is the danger about the infrastructure program that the government is pursuing. You have a ridiculous efficiency gap. So you're spending all of this money, and based on the reports, there was, I think, a World Bank report that said our efficiency gap is at 41%. So for every dollar we spend on infrastructure, 41 cents of that is wasted because of inefficiencies, lack of capacity, corruption, you name it, a myriad of things. But we're wasting almost half of a dollar for every dollar we spend. And so unless we fix that, we are throwing money away. And you see it. You see it in all of the unfinished projects. You see it in those pump stations that have not yet been complete, in roads that are built to substandard quality. The people are losing, and they're losing because this government refuses to take a step back to say, look, let's take a rational look at this. In Guyana, we have a definite capacity in terms of government, private sector ability to implement this public infrastructure program. Seeing that we have a finite capacity, we therefore need to not announce more projects, but we need to invest in improving our capacity. It therefore means that your budget may not necessarily be 58% on just hard infrastructure. Maybe we will take it down to a more reasonable sum, given the fact that we know that we don't have the capacity to execute a massive PSIP. So you bring it down, you cut down your inefficiencies, and you invest those savings in building your human capital, in retaining your young professionals in your country. But there is a reluctance on the part of this current administration, and it is costing Guyanese, and it will cost our future generations. I'll give you a typical example. We announced, not we, the government announced significant investment in hospitals across the country. There was no health study that justified that level of investment. And mind you, hospitals are secondary and tertiary levels of health care. Primary health care is completely neglected. And the science, the studies, everything shows us that when you invest in primary health care and you invest in more of a preventative paradigm than a treatment paradigm, your country fares better, your human resource, your human capital. They live longer, they live healthier. A longer living, healthier population means more production.
What are some of the primary healthcare or preventative approaches? What does that look like?
These are, for example, augmenting within the communities access to regular checkups for your sugar, as we call it, diabetes, hypertension, dealing with those chronic diseases at a primary or an interventionist, early intervention / preventative within that paradigm, because that is what is being left untreated, resulting in our population getting sick and then having to be referred to secondary healthcare or hospitalization, etc. So we want to minimize that. We want to catch diseases early. We want to invest in prevention and early detection instead of neglecting that component, and then we're spending money on hospitalizations, etc. It is only a matter of shifting our focus. But there seems to be no reasoning with this current administration that seems to think that turning Assad here, declaring a hotel open here is somehow development. And it is not. It really is not.
Yeah. Do you think the capitalist approach is more appealing to voters and people who sort of have this idea of progress? Because generally when we see, just by visually, once we see things going up, once we see movement being made, investments being made, that sort of strikes for a country who for a long time has been the have-nots. That strikes us as sort of a form of development. Doesn't that catch the eye of many people?
It does catch the eye, but people are also understanding that when I leave the glitzy building and I come home and I open my fridge, it's empty. And so what people want, they want both.
Yeah.
And both of those spaces, it's possible.
Yeah.
But there is a refusal to deliver that quality of life. People are being told, oh, you have to wait. No, they don't. 3 years ago in my budget presentation, I showed something. I showed that if we were able to, given the size of the public sector investment program, if we were able to close the efficiency gap and just, let's say, bring it down by even 10, 15%, I showed how those savings could result in, for example, public servants getting a 10% increase. How cane farmers would be able to get an increase, and how we'd be able to help Gaisuko without it being a drain on the national purse, just from closing the efficiency gap. But we unfortunately are in a political culture where propaganda is the order of the day, and we have a Herculean task of really reaching to the Guyanese citizen and being able to reason with them in the same manner that we're talking here today, to help them to understand that you have a duty to go behind the hype, you have a duty to go behind the rhetoric, and really understand what is happening, and use the power of your index finger to make the change that you want to see. Look, no government has a right to be entrenched in office indefinitely. You go in, you don't deliver on your promises, citizens vote them out. And for me, I'm passionate about helping our citizens to understand that you have the power, irrespective of all of these grand theories that you may hear. You have the power of your vote. And as a leader, for me, it is something that will keep me constantly on my A game, as it were, knowing that, hey, if I don't deliver in 5 years, these people are so serious that we are out of there. And so we had better get our A game on. But if the people in government believe that they can manipulate and raise base and take advantage of ethnic and of ethnic differences to hold on to power, they feel no compulsion to bring their A game to Guyanese. They focus more on division and strife than on actually adumbrating policies that will help the people. This is why the National Assembly has not met since the budget was passed earlier in the year. Parliament, the most important forum for the hearing of Guyanese voices, hasn't met in months. And so the struggle has to be to change the entire culture of politics. But it has to be for the people of Guyana to understand that it is something that we collectively have to do. There's nothing wrong with the capitalist model. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. The government, however, has a duty to its citizens first and foremost. To its citizens.
You said Parliament hasn't met since the budget passed.
Right.
Why is that?
Because the government hasn't seen it fit to call Parliament. You see, the opposition can't call Parliament. It's not within our purview to do that. And so unless the government deems it necessary to have a sitting of the National Assembly, none is had.
Have you, as your party, communicated?
Oh, absolutely.
And then what has the response been?
Mute, radio silence. I'll give you an example. We have this issue of Venezuela brewing. An organic law was just passed purporting to annex RS Equibo. The Foreign Relations Sectoral Committee, of which I am the deputy chairperson, last met in November. I wrote in February to Minister Todd requesting the convening of the sectoral committee. I wrote again in March requesting, have not even had an acknowledgement of my correspondence. So there is no effort to even maintain a relationship of cordiality and unity in a situation that most requires it, our territorial integrity and our sovereignty. There is no urgency there. So what else are they going to treat with urgency?
Yeah. I mean, you think that a territorial dispute is the prime time for,
Absolutely.
unity and leadership.
And the opposition has been very clear that we will support the government.
Yeah.
But in the absence of information, what are we supporting?
I do. I even will go as far to say as, it even makes the government look good to reach out and engage you.
Absolutely.
I do have a question though, and this is just based on the sort of forgive my bluntness. See, this is the gap, so we could be blunt.
We could gap.
The toxic nature of politics, right?
Right.
When the whoever's in government includes opposition, do you think that there's an issue of trust with information sharing and communication where, okay, like, maybe if I'm in government and you're in opposition and I discuss national issues with you that perhaps expose some of my government's weaknesses that then it now is used as a campaign point against me. Do you think there's any of that insecurity, or how does that dynamic work?
I don't think it's insecurity. I think it's arrogance.
Okay.
And that is dangerous because you don't know what you don't know. And particularly when it comes to the Guyana-Venezuela controversy, the opposition has made itself available. We've made all of our experts available. For example, former Minister Carl Greenidge is still our national agent on this issue because it is not about politics. This is about preserving the shape of our beloved country. And there has to be a place where political partisanship is laid down and we understand that, hey, we might not have a Guyana to fight over if we don't stand together on this. So it's an issue of arrogance. It's an issue of this government appearing to believe that they have it all under control. And we've seen that they continue to drop the ball. Maduro has proceeded with his organic law as if the Argyle Declaration did not exist. And I will say that it is only after the opposition was very vocal in our criticism of CARICOM for not saying anything that we saw yesterday. They put out a statement condemning, well, not condemning, but bemoaning the passage of this organic law as being inimical to the peace of the region, etc. Maduro has to be told in no uncertain terms by CARICOM that he is wrong and that you cannot do this and that you have to desist from this course of action, because that is what is warranted. This is unprecedented in this part of the world, that you pass a decree and annex or purport to annex 2/3 of your neighbor's territory. It's unheard of, and it requires the egregious nature of the action requires a far more sturdy and a far stronger response than we are seeing.
Based on what you're saying now and what you've sort of been saying, online through your platforms, it seems as though you think that the government isn't doing enough to really put that, like, to be firm enough with Venezuela.
No, they're not.
What do you think? What do you think they should be done? Not what they should do, but what we should do as a country.
For example,
because our military power isn't exactly threatening.
Right. So it has to be a strategy of reliance on the international community, which we are doing. But we have to abandon this whole notion of appeasement. It doesn't work. We saw Irfan Ali making a big demonstration of presenting to Maduro, rum as a sign of good faith. Maduro, even prior to that, never deviated from his course of action. There should be no exchanging of gifts in the first place. There seems to be a reluctance to understand that this is an adversary. And whilst you will not be belligerent, because Guyana has never been that, we've never been the aggressor, our posture has to say that we understand that this is somebody that wants 2/3 of our territory, not the kind of appeasement that we saw Irfan Ali attempting to engage in. And now is left with egg on his face because Maduro has done what Maduro said from day one he would do, which is pass as law, and have it have the effect of law in Venezuela. We maintain that as far as we are concerned, the law is null, void, and of no legal effect here. The second thing is that by now, this government should have summoned the Venezuelan ambassador. I have not seen that done. He should have been summoned and a formal note of protest delivered to him to be delivered to his government. I'll show you the difference in posture. The UK displayed a flag of Venezuela without the additional star that they've since put on their flag to represent the Guyana Essequibo region, and they delivered a notice of protest to the UK. Why aren't you putting the star there? Have we summoned the Venezuelan ambassador? No, we have not. What is the interaction that we're having with our own ambassador who's now in Caracas? As the Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, I couldn't tell you. As the Deputy Chair of the Foreign Relations Committee of Parliament, I couldn't tell you because the government has not seen it fit to brief. The other issue that we have is that this government has to be very clear as to how they will address the issue of Venezuelan migration into Guyana. Because we've been saying that the possibility of a soft invasion is high. The use and the deliberate injection of migrants or of population into another territory. There are studies that show that this is actually a tool that is used in hybrid warfare. So if you're playing a long game, you could take over territory without firing a shot.
But how do you see them infiltrating our society? They get here through citizenship. Minister Todd has said or claimed that 80% of the migrants are of Guyanese ancestry who moved away and are remigrating.
But you know what? In order to be able to make that statement, Hugh Todd would have had to have access to records because there is certainly a naturalization process. I have written asking for the registrar's office to be made to appear before the select committee, the sectoral committee rather, and to present to us those records so that maybe we could say, yes, they're right, this is so. But they have not, and they cannot, because they know for a fact that it is not so. And then there's a very basic way that you will know. There is no Venezuelan of Guyanese descent that does not speak English or that does not understand English.
Is there a competency test before being naturalized?
No, there certainly is not. There certainly is not. And so we do not buy this narrative that they're seeking to foist on us, that 80% of them, because it contradicts what they said in the National Assembly. They said that the majority were indigenous Warraws that migrated back and forth in the usual pattern of migration. That is what they said. That they were indigenous Warraws from Venezuela who would move back and forth. And now they're saying that the tens of thousands of people who are here in all our villages, in every village in Guyana, in every town, in the city, that they're of Guyanese descent? No, we know otherwise. And this is where the irresponsibility of this administration is concerning. Can you not see that it is entirely possible that because you have such a laid back and lax approach to really understanding who are the people within your border, that you may be literally handing our country over? Can you not understand and see that? Does that not occur to you?
But being in conflict with Venezuela in such a frontal way as we are right now, where it's become a global talking point, why do you think that the border security with regards to migration is so lax? Shouldn't that be something that's given more attention?
It absolutely is something.
What do you think is the motive behind that? I mean, if any.
It is a refusal to acknowledge exactly where we are. It is a refusal. I'll tell you what. Under the coalition administration, there was something called Operation Armadillo. And what Operation Armadillo sought to do was to have enough military presence in the frontier settlements. And so there was a deliberate fanning out of the military presence along the frontier settlements in order to detect and deter and to regularize migration. That has been discontinued. Instead, we have our military cleaning drains in and around the city. And I have a problem with that because it is a question of priorities. Now, I am aware of the fact that when Haitians, for example, were being allowed to come into Guyana, that he was opposition leader then at the time, Jack Dio, said, oh, they're bringing it to register them and to secure an electoral advantage. But he refuses.
Because Haitians are of African descent?
Because this is what he said. This is not what I said. This is what he said.
Just clarifying.
And so he now refuses to accept the observation in the reverse when it comes to his motive for being so lax with.
But Venezuelans aren't East Indian.
No, but you see, this is the point. But it does not change that perception. Haitians coming pursuant to a treaty obligation that we had, a revised treaty of Chaguaramas that says that every CARICOM member state is entitled to a 6-month automatic stay in a CARICOM member state. That is the law.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that we are not party to any convention or agreement on refugees, 1. 2, with Venezuela as it relates to the treatment of migrants. But we see the disparity in treatment. And I want to be clear about something. We are committed. If anybody in your country is entitled to the full protection of the law, they're entitled to the protection and the upholding of their human rights. That's non-negotiable. Because we want to be clear, because when you talk about these things, people want to paint you as xenophobic, etc. Any person within the territory of Guyana is entitled to the protection of the law and the preservation of their human rights. Of course, there are limitations. If you break the law, etc., the processes will kick into place. But at a fundamental level, we also have a duty to render whatever humanitarian assistance we can. But the government of Guyana, their principal obligation is to the people of Guyana. Who else is going to take care of us if our government doesn't? And so to the degree that you abdicate that responsibility, to the degree that you refuse to put in place a proper immigration policy, to the degree that you refuse to invest in monitoring the border and regularizing migration and allowing an influx of population that, 1, overwhelms our education system, overwhelms our healthcare system, overwhelms our public service, because, of course, we're built to cater for a particular amount of people. And you suddenly have tens of thousands of persons put onto a system not geared to carry it. That system collapses.
Is there any record or potential information of how many how many people are utilizing our public systems that aren't Guyanese born?
We have been asking for it. And the government refuses to make this information public. And because the government as well does not place a premium on data-driven decision making. They don't even understand the importance of data capture. So there is such an ad hoc system of, even in the first place, capturing the data and then mining it for the information that you need for informed policy decisions. That it's almost like Cheto's land. It's almost like the Wild Wild West.
Well, to me, I feel like it's happened for as long as I've been living in Guyana. I feel like that's been happening. And in my opinion, it contributes to a lot of the inefficiencies we spoke about earlier.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we don't have that data. There's no record of where money's wasted, what it's being put into, what are the returns on that investment.
Absolutely.
And honestly, even myself who does, some video production and stuff, and I'm always interested in how Guyana works and how we can improve and how we can get more young people to think about things. But that can never happen because we never have a reliable source of information. Since I moved back in 2016 to now, I've never been able to find like coherent information that gives us like an idea of how the country is running, like what's going on. And that's, it also makes me question, like, whoever I vote for, like, how are they making their decisions as well? Because I feel like we should all have access to that information.
Absolutely, because that is the basis for sound decision making. You can't make decisions unless you have information. And so we are hampered in that regard. Look, we can't even get the census results up to now. Not even the preliminary results to let us know exactly what our population size is. We can't get that. We've been asking in the Parliament for months. Oh, they're testing, they're confirming. Preliminary results. Not even that. So even the basis to determine that you need more hospitals, what is the basis on which you are arriving at that conclusion?
Speaking of hospitals and immigration, I recently read that there's going to be a big influx of people from Bangladesh, medical professionals from Bangladesh coming in to basically support our healthcare system. I haven't really had the time. Well, I've been thinking about it, but it's a tough one for me to sort of reconcile with, because I do think our healthcare system desperately needs support. But at the same time, I do believe in obviously prioritize local capacity building.
Right.
You seem to be against that, especially such an heavy influx. What are your what do you think are the shortcomings of that? Because I do feel like Guyana's healthcare isn't renowned for much. I mean, I don't want to say, by the way, that they're not great doctors and nurses and professionals who really help carry the system. But, on just a foundational level, we always struggle. We've seen politicians, especially people who are in government, go abroad for treatment. And the average man has to stay here.
Absolutely.
And deal with what we have.
Yeah.
So why would you be against people coming in the, well, indefinitely, but in the short term now?
I am not against people coming in. Let's be clear that given our developmental thrust, we need labor. We need labor force. Our population is just too small.
Yeah.
What I have a difficulty with is that you have not seen it fit to prioritize the incentivization of your own people staying here. And that's what I have a problem with. So, for example, we've brought in Cuban nurses. They get free transportation. They get free housing. Why isn't that extended to a Guyanese nurse that was born here, that belongs here, that grew up here, that studied here, and that chose to stay here? Why isn't that extended? And that is my fundamental problem. You refuse to give our nurses a livable wage, a proper increase. You refuse to incentivize them staying, but you're bringing people into the country that you have to find accommodation for. You're bringing people into the country that you are providing transportation for. Why isn't there a bus service taking our nurses to and from work? You're doing it for the Cuban nurses that you've brought in. Why isn't it that our nurses can't be given priority in housing developments so that they're able to aspire to be homeowners? Why aren't there concessionary rates or subsidized rates for borrowing for nurses, for teachers, for people in the joint services, from banks, for example? But you're bringing people in, you're paying them more, and you are subsidizing their standard of living. And I have a difficulty with that because you're not doing it for Guyanese, and we must come first in our own country. And I have no apologies for saying that. None whatsoever. We can do better. The same facilities that we are extending to people that we're bringing in, we must first extend to our Guyanese citizens. Look, Alex, you think about it. Why don't we have a subsidized transportation program for school children? Why don't we have basic food items subsidized? There's no existing social safety net for our Guyanese brothers and sisters. And the most heartrending thing of it is that for the first time in this country's history, we could afford these things. I hear Vice President Jagdeo say, oh, y'all want to feed the people. Yes, we want to feed the people because a hungry population doesn't produce. A hungry population cannot meaningfully contribute to the development of this nation. So yes, we want to feed people. You know, we could do better. More is possible. Better is possible. I know it.
I agree with what you're saying. Just to play devil's advocate here, because, what would you say? I'm assuming the government would say something like, well, what about the cash grant we give every child, who goes to school?
Right.
Doesn't that count for something?
Look, I have been on record as saying that we have no difficulty with the cash grant, but it is a one-off payment. So you have a child going to school, for example, you get money for uniform for the year. That's it. Mm-hmm. Yes, their uniforms are taken care of, but what good are those uniforms if they can't get to school?
Yeah. What
good are those uniforms if they can't get to school? Because they don't have money to take the public transportation to go, So it really is a question of where our priorities lie. And frankly, this government uses that cash grant system as a cash transfer. Mm-hmm. Because invariably it ends up in the hands of a few people when it's spent, and it's just, all it is a conduit back. But look at who maybe if we subsidize public transportation, it will benefit. Let's take a look at these things.
Yeah.
So I am not impressed with the management of this economy by the PPPC government. It requires just heart. It just requires thinking about people. It requires just loving people and loving every Guyanese enough to want to see them do better, irrespective of whether they're in your stronghold or not your stronghold,
100% agree. You talk about loving every Guyanese, and this brings me to the next topic I just want us to briefly touch on.
Sure.
The rule of law.
What rule of law?
Well, there you go. So, if it's one thing that I think that levels all of us in our society is that it really is a lot to who has access to justice. My wife and I were talking about this just the other day. She has a few colleagues who she was telling me about, and she's told me these stories over the last maybe year and a half. We've seen a lot of like petty crime happen, and as a result, people are people she knows have been injured and almost like fatally wounded. I have many friends and family who've been in accidents, who've and has it changed their lives as a result of the person acting upon them being drunk and driving.
Right.
And life goes on, it seems. It, the other day, I had a friend who was, God rest his soul, he was killed a couple years ago, and it went to court. His the people who shot him admitted to doing it, and they got off. And so I'm just kind of wondering, like, how does our society move forward? We talk about fundamental things just to move forward as a country. Like, how do we get closer to sort of any form of justice? Where does that even begin to start?
Our leaders have a duty. Our leaders have a duty to respect the rule of law. Because of the nature of the society that we live in, there's a saying, the rot starts from the head. And that is what we're seeing. To the degree that a government or people in leadership, to the degree that they do not understand that they have to uphold the rule of law, is the degree to which society begins to decay. And so, as long as there is the perception that this person is above the law or that person is above the law, it breeds a whole ethos of lawlessness. Because even the government is not holding itself accountable. Look, let me say this. We think that it has no impact on the population when, for example, the court gives an order that says that you have to have, for example, a parent company guarantee in place, and the government is fighting on that issue. Something that is in place for the protection of the country, for the protection of its citizens. You are literally fighting against that. That sends a message. It sends a message when somebody who is accused of rape is allowed to continue in public office without consequences, save and except public pressure that was brought to bear. It has consequences. It has consequences when the chairman of a police service commission can say that I got a call from the president asking, why aren't you promoting my men? It has consequences. And so this degradation that you're seeing on the bottom here is a direct result of that degradation of law and order at the top. It is also as a direct result of poverty, and it is as a direct result of some of our young people losing their way. Because to the degree that we are all consumed with surviving, is the degree to which we have no time to look up to see the wider problems in society. And so this is why with great power comes great responsibility. You're the government, you have the power, you therefore bear the brunt of the responsibility to engineer the type of social change, positive change that you want to see, to be the example of accountability and transparency that you want to see in your society. Yeah.
Yeah. So we could agree that both parties have a responsibility to uphold this.
Absolutely.
That we can do a better job, all of us, and the citizens.
All of us and the citizens. Look at the littering problem, for example.
Yeah.
We as citizens, we could do a better job disposing of our garbage.
Yeah.
We can do a better job. But we have to want it, and we have to want it bad.
Definitely. I think a big part of it starts with us.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation so far, and I can't thank you enough for indulging me. I would like to sort of have the back end of our lovely conversation talking about, 2025. I know this is a big year for you and your party, and looking forward, I guess we, as young people, and I don't speak on behalf of all youngish people. But as a youngish person, I definitely kind of, wonder about how the population is being communicated to, and where we're being led by our leaders. And one thing is like, what are these parties promising us, or what are they, where are they leading us? Where are they leading the future of Guyana? And when I look at the APNU AFC, I will admit, and this is not necessarily a criticism, I'm just more curious, like, what am I gonna see? Like, what does it take, for me to give you, what are you giving me for my vote? Like, how is my life gonna be better? Like, what should I expect from you as a potential candidate for government?
Well, what you should expect from us is definitely that we will be putting Guyanese first. And we'll be putting the interests of the people of Guyana first. That's the first thing. What you can expect from us is to see a policy-driven type of government. Heavy focus on the building of our institutions. A country cannot thrive in the absence of strong institutions. You will see the management of the economy in such a way where the private sector is allowed to play the role that the private sector must play, and government will play the role that government must play. And that is to provide the enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. We also, as government, will be placing heavy emphasis on our social responsibilities in keeping with the Constitution of Guyana. That is what it requires of government, that we take care of the social, economic welfare of the people of this nation. And so you will see emphasis on health care, and particularly emphasis on retaining and attracting training and retaining our human resources here. As it relates to education, you will see the same thing. I believe that the unfortunate thing with the 20 to 2015 iteration of the coalition is that it did not have enough time for a lot of what it was, what it had done to materialize. You saw it present in a number of sectors. Let's take electricity, for example. Because we were able to make rapid change there, it resulted in a far more reliable energy supply over that 5-year period, because it took planning, it took sound fiscal management. I'll give you an example. We cut out a lot of the middlemanship that we saw earlier, and we dealt with the original equipment manufacturer for spares. So we got the best quality at the best price, redounding to savings here that we could have then plugged back into, for example, a number of the developments that you saw in terms of metering and cutting losses, etc. So that's one sector. What you will see is a heavy emphasis on education, particularly investing in the University of Guyana, because that is the flagship of this nation. It is our university. I am a product of the University of Guyana. I'm proud to be a product of the University of Guyana. And so you will see heavy investment in innovation and in technology. In, for example, having satellite campuses. Region 10 needs a university campus. It does. There's no reason why a Lindener should be traveling all the way from Linden to go to Turkine. There's one already in Region 6. And so we have got to And we're committed to having the tertiary education sector managed in such a way that people are able to either go to school online, or for those cases in which it is required that you have facilities within particular regions and population centers that allows for easy access to tertiary education. So you will see what we have called a people-centered approach to development. How do we give Guyanese this good life that we know is possible and for the first time we can make possible? In terms of the management of the oil and gas sector, you will see a return to an institutionalized management of the sector. There is no way that an entire sector should be managed by one man and two of his, for want of a better word, minions. You have to have a strong regulatory and institutional framework if we are to get the most from this sector. Because when that resource is gone, it is gone. It's not renewable. And so we have to set up government in a way that helps us to harness that. What you will see is a well thought out plan being implemented for the management of every sector. Sea defense, climate change, and that whole conversation has to be better managed. It doesn't require arrogance. It requires our government to be clear that right now, Guyana is solving a problem. Not caused by Guyana, but caused by wars in the Middle East and the war with Russia and Ukraine that has affected access to fossil fuels. And so we are solving a problem. That's the first thing that we have to be very clear about. And yes, it's not up for debate that we have a duty to the environment. We do. And an understanding of that duty has to manifest itself like a strong EPA, for example. Another EPA that is criticized by the court as being lackluster and completely inept. So we have to indicate an understanding that yes, we are filling a crucial gap right now. We are committed to doing so in a sustainable manner, in a manner that preserves the environment, and that begins with a sound institutional and regulatory framework to so do. And then it goes to us understanding that we have to be a part of the transition to renewables, because that's the future. Renewable energy has to become a part of our energy lexicon from now. This gas to shore silver bullet is not it. It's not it. That will be a solution in the medium term. But in the long term, we have to be front and center as an example of the transition from fossil fuels to renewables. And we can do it. We can absolutely do it. Because it has to do with priorities again. We are seeing the non-oil segment of our economy being terribly neglected because everything is oil money, and they run into the natural resource fund as often as they want, and they take the money out, and when you ask them questions in Parliament, you get no answers. But we will change that, because we believe that those monies have to be used to only fund urgent developmental priorities. We believe that there has to be significant investment, much the way of, for example, Norway, that allows that money to grow and to be there for our future generations, and to use the money and the income that we're getting to support the growth of the non-oil segments, our rice, our gold, etc. That is suffering tremendously. I was in Blackbush Boulder last week, and the Gandhi bug has decimated the crop.
Yeah, it's happening in Mahika as well. I was in
Yes,
Mahika,
you
same
know,
thing.
a young man from, I think he's from 43 Village, but he and his new bride lived in 48, hung himself, committed suicide because of the magnitude of the losses. Now, what does that say to us? Why isn't there something like crop insurance that will help farmers who are susceptible to these phenomena to weather the storm? An agricultural bank geared towards the agriculture sector, not taking a commercial bank and tacking on an agri program on it, but an agricultural bank like we had back in the 70s and 80s, Guy Bank, geared towards dealing with farmers. We have the resources to do that. Why are we not doing it? There's no argument against anything like that. So it has to be an approach that says, you know what, we will put Guyanese first. We will invest and we will do what is necessary to make sure that Guyanese get the advantage. And it's a question ultimately of will. Will there have to be hard decisions taken? Yes, there will be. But there is a way that the government takes hard decisions. And that is, it has to take the time to walk its population through. This is what we have to do. This is why we have to do it, etc. So I am optimistic that come 2025, we will see a whole new ethos in governance in Guyana. I know that it is possible. And I know the people of Guyana are longing for different, for new, for fresh, for inspiring type leadership. And I think come 2025, we're going to see people emerging that promise that, or that hold the potential to bring that to Guyana.
You know, a big part of us moving forward and improving and getting better, improving ourselves, is sort of learning from the experiences of our past and maybe areas of improvement where we could have where we went wrong, where we could have done better. Looking back on your tenure in government, is there anything? What would you say you've learned the most? That, you know, should you be in office again, that, you know, you would definitely tighten up on, or you maybe see it a different way now? Is there anything that you think that, you know, you could have done better? You did mention that, you know, your party's tenure in government, it perhaps wasn't enough time to materialize the things you really wanted to do. And I understand that. But should you get this position again, is there anything that, you know, you can outly say that, look, this is what we would give more attention to, or put more effort into?
Absolutely. The first one would be communicating what the plans are to the people so that you get buy-in. There is no use operating without a proper communication system. We take it for granted that, we've said something once, and so, yes, the people ought to know. No. We have to be more out there, more in the community, helping people to understand what our vision is, what we plan to do, and how they could be a part of it, the role that they are expected to play. So definitely communication. Accessibility is also another issue that we would definitely have to work on in terms of reducing that gap between people and government. Those are two of the things that I am very passionate about us changing very, very, very quickly once we get back into government. Every Guyanese citizen must be able to approach government, whether it be at the level of the NDC, whether it be at the level of the RDC, whether it be at the level of the municipality, must be able to access the system quickly, easily, and in an efficient manner in terms of the time that it takes for our citizens to be able to conduct business. There has to be a transformation in terms of our thinking about leadership, and our posture has to be more of servant leadership. We are here to serve the people of Guyana, not the other way around. So those are some of the things that I believe that we can learn and that we can implement very, very quickly once we are given the opportunity. And as long as we are able to make the people of Guyana feel as if they are partners with us on this development journey, I think we will guarantee ourselves another term after we would return in 2025. People want to feel a part of. We have to manage the oil sector differently. We have to be able to come up with arrangements where Guyanese feel as if they are a part of the growth of this industry. And there are models to do it. You know, Guyanese have to feel that, they are directly able to benefit and to partake in this economy, and not that it's something happening here and they are over here. And so we have to approach the management of the sector properly. We have to forge a paradigm where there is a true partnership with these international companies that want to come in to the country. I'm not talking anything about nationalization or any of that. Lest I be misconstrued. But there's certainly financial models, for example, that will see locals being able to play a greater role in the realization of the profits of this. And so if we could get Guyanese to feel as if they have a stake, I think we'll be going a far way. You go to the man in the street, oh, we just discovered an 11th find. And they're like, yeah, what does that have to do with me?
Yeah.
We have to change that conversation.
Yep.
And there are models out there that make it possible. What we have to have are the people and the will to do it. And I think we do.
So the current leader of the APNU AFC right now is Mr. Aubrey Norton.
Yes.
I know you guys haven't held Congress yet.
Yes.
And I'm reading that Roysdale Ford is very much interested in challenging for that position.
Mm-hmm.
So with all this, goings on, I'm just really curious. Are you throwing your hat into the race?
This is a question that I've been asked at least 50 times for the last week.
51 then.
And this is the 51st. And my response is always the same. The people decide that. All right? The way the process works is that you have to be nominated. Nominations process hasn't opened. And so I do not believe in foisting myself. I am sure that and I've seen public indications that I should, etc. But the PNC, thankfully, has a process by which this is done. And so I am the kind of person that will respect the process. I will await the commencement of the process. A date for Congress has not yet been announced. The Congress is overdue. It's been constitutionally due since December last. And so we have a mandate and a duty to abide by our Constitution and have the Congress held. But, nominations are not yet open. So really for me, any declarations will be premature. My focus is on how do we keep holding this government accountable for delivering a proper quality of life for Guyanese? When the time comes and there are pronouncements to be made, I will make a pronouncement one way or the other. But for now, until the process is activated, it hasn't been. So I think any utterances from me will be, to say the least, premature and presumptuous.
Well, Amanza, I gotta say, I do appreciate, I do appreciate your leadership role. I do appreciate all
Thank you.
the positive work you do for the people you represent. That's very important. It's very strong, and I know how being in opposition and not maybe having the resources, to get your message across is tough. But I will say, I think you do a good job of doing that. I do follow your page. I like to be informed.
Really?
I like to be
Thank you.
informed on both sides. I'm not a political person at all.
Right.
I really, to be quite frank, turned off by politics. But I am interested in where the country is going and where the leaders are leading us.
Absolutely.
And you've been doing a good job of informing from your side. It's done wonders for people like me to keep abreast on certain things. And I wish you nothing but the best. I really hope that like you said, we at some point both sides can all come to the table and really sort this out. At the end of the day, I think all of us just really want the best for Guyana, and
Fundamentally,
and we
Alex,
got to get it right.
Fundamentally, at a human level, we all want the same things. We want our children to be well taken care of. We want to be able to feed our families. We want to be able to work and to earn fairly and to live our days out in some semblance of peace and order in this, ever-changing world. Across the board, that is the desire. And I believe that if we approach politics with the common understanding of we're human first, and as human beings we have certain basic innate desires that we would like to realize in our limited time here on this planet, I think we will be far better off and our political discourse will be so much better. But it has to start with us. And we have to lead the way. And yes, I know that you're turned off by politics, but people like yourself have such an important role to play in terms of sharing information and being dispassionate in your assessment and analyses, because people need information. And what we need to do is give people information and give them the respect of being able to make up their minds based on the information that they have.
Well, I thank you again for coming here to share all the information you have, and we'll be sure to
Thanks
help
for
disseminate.
having me on the Gyaff. Thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mansu.